What if those ancient words pressed into clay 5,000 years ago weren't meant to welcome the gods, but to mourn their leaving? Imagine if every Sumerian tablet, every careful star chart, every ritual in those shadowy ziggurats wasn't a beginning at all, just the last echo of a world watching its teachers slip away into silence. Down in southern Iraq, where the air wavers and the heat squeezes the land dry, the ruins of Eridu sleep beneath layers of sand. Wind sweeps over the Tell, a hill built from the bones of 10,000 mud brick walls. And if you listen in the deep hours before dawn, it almost sounds like the Sumerians are still there, whispering through the dust. They weren't trying to preserve triumph, not glory, just absence. Before we sink into those ruins, if you're the kind of person who likes to poke holes in the stories we tell about ourselves, maybe subscribe. And if you're out there listening right now, wherever you are, drop a comment. Tell me your place, your time. I want to picture this story drifting through all those dark rooms, threading its way between waking and sleep. The moment that changed everything wasn't loud. It didn't come with trumpets or cheering crowds. In 1849, Austin Henry Layard started digging at the library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh. No one expected much. Then his workers cracked open a chamber packed with clay tablets, thousands, stacked in neat rows, baked hard by old fires, waiting for someone to listen. When scholars finally broke the code of cuneiform, they thought they'd find creation stories, hymns to gods, tales of divine beings shaping humans out of dust and ambition. But what they found was a chronicle of leaving. The Sumerian king list, copied for centuries, starts with a line that keeps archaeologists up at night. After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. Not created by people, not won in battle, descended, like rulership belonged somewhere else and just dropped in for a while. Then the tablet lists 8 kings before the flood. Ululim, 28,800 years. Alaulgar, 36,000. Enmenluana, 43,200. Numbers that don't make sense, recorded in the same no-nonsense style they used for counting barley. And then suddenly the text shifts. Then the flood swept over. Everything after that changes. The kings who follow stick around for a few decades, maybe a century if they're lucky. The impossible turns into ordinary history. The cosmic order is gone. What those scribes really recorded wasn't the moment the Anunnaki arrived. It was the moment they stopped ruling. The moment direct guidance ended, and people were left without a manual running systems they never designed. Picture yourself at the Oriental Institute in Chicago, walking through the silent stacks, looking at what's left of that king list behind glass. The clay feels cool when the curator lifts it out, resting on a padded tray. Thousands of marks, pressed in with a reed stylus by a hand that hasn't existed for 4,000 years. Look close and you can spot it, a thumbprint, sealed into the clay before it dried. The mark of a scribe who believed the story he copied mattered more than his own name, more than his own life. That scribe wasn't inventing legends. He was marking a change. He wrote down the moment the world shifted from direct divine rule to human self-government. Everything the Sumerians built afterward, cities, temples, star maps, was an attempt to keep alive what existed before the silence, before the gods pulled back and left only memories. The question still pressed into that clay is simple but impossible to answer. Why did they leave? To get close to that mystery, we have to look at what the Sumerians believed they'd lost. In Nippur, the spiritual heart of Sumer, archaeologists from the University of Pennsylvania uncovered a temple complex rebuilt 16 times over 3,000 years. Each time they used the same plan. Same direction, same layout, same spot for the altar. Through wars, floods, dynasties rising and falling, every generation rebuilt what had been lost, following a pattern they believed wasn't theirs to change. Original, sacred, untouchable. This isn't how you'd expect a civilization to act. Progress usually means breaking new ground, making things better, outdoing the previous generation. The Sumerians didn't care about outdoing anyone. They wanted to hold on to what came before, to keep it just the way it was in those distant days, they always mentioned in temple dedications and foundation texts. Take that brick from the Edim ziggurat in Babylon, now sitting in the British Museum. Nebuchadnezzar II had his inscription carved into it around 600 BCE. I have rebuilt the Edim to its ancient height. I raised its top to heaven as it was in former times. Not look at this marvel I've created, or see what wonders I've built, just as it was in former times. Nebuchadnezzar, king of an empire that stretched across half the known world, called his greatest building project an act of restoration. And he wasn't exaggerating. Archaeologists found exactly what he said they would: older layers, one on top of the next, stretching back through thousands of years. Each layer followed the same sacred proportions. Nebuchadnezzar didn't invent the ziggurat. He inherited it, and he poured huge resources into making sure it matched a blueprint that was already ancient when he came to the throne. The Sumerians had a word for this, jibble. It means to renew, to restore, to return things to how they used to be. But restore to what point exactly? That question echoes in every line of cuneiform pressed into clay. Before the flood, for sure, but also before something else. Before the silence, before the gods stopped speaking to humans, before the Anunnaki pulled back and became distant, watching but no longer guiding. The tablets don't leave much room for doubt. The Eridu Genesis, one of the oldest flood stories out there, talks about a time when the Anunnaki were born and cities were built. Past tense. Not the gods are here with us, but they were. Even the grammar draws a line between then and now. Another text, The Debate Between Sheep and Grain, paints a picture of humans before civilization, crawling around on all fours, eating grass. The Anunnaki step in, create sheep and grain, teach people how to farm, how to bake bread, how to weave. But this all gets told as a memory, something the ancestors experienced. By the time the Sumerians wrote it down, those days were over. The knowledge survived through rituals and traditions, but the teachers themselves had vanished. In the back rooms of the Louvre, there's a small clay cylinder sitting in storage. It came from a foundation deposit at Lagash, buried under a temple wall around 2400 BCE. The inscription is short and formal, meant for future generations who'd eventually rebuild on the same spot. This is the restoration of what was before. The Anunnaki, the great gods, have made this decision binding. That wording matters. Not the Anunnaki are deciding this now, but have made. The decision happened in the past. Humans are just carrying it out, following orders from gods who no longer speak to them. The Anunnaki aren't present. They're invoked as absent authorities whose old decrees still hold power. By the time someone buried that cylinder in 2400 BCE, the Anunnaki were already just a memory. They weren't walking among people, weren't showing up in temples with new instructions. They'd shifted from living gods to legendary ancestors. And the Sumerians, left on their own, clung to what they'd inherited. They followed the old designs. They kept up the systems, even if they didn't fully understand them anymore. That's what sets the Sumerians apart from the civilizations that came later. The Greeks imagined gods who meddled in everything, always just out of sight. The Hebrews believed in a God who never left, always present, always watching. The Sumerians, though, built a world around absence. Their gods had gone. The age of direct contact was over, so they organized everything, rituals, buildings, even their science, around the fear of losing the last scraps of knowledge the gods had left behind. Sometimes, late at night, I picture those clay tablets sitting in their museum vaults, soaking up the darkness. Each one feels like a message in a bottle, tossed into the future by scribes who knew they were living in the long shadow of something greater. They weren't celebrating the gods. They were grieving them. Every ritual, every ziggurat, every star chart, these were acts of remembrance. The Sumerians kept saying over and over, "The gods were here once, they taught us these things, and we can't let ourselves forget." Here, where things get weird. If the Anunnaki really did leave, you'd expect the ancient tablets to say when. You'd expect them to mark the day the gods just walked out and left humanity to fend for itself. And actually, they do. The texts record that moment with all the dry detail of a government ledger. They copied it over and over until memory hardened into scripture. It's the flood. Picture this: 1929, southern Iraq. British archaeologist Leonard Woolley is standing at the bottom of a trench in staring at something that shouldn't be there. His team had been digging down through centuries of debris, bits of pottery, charcoal, all the mess of ancient life. Then suddenly nothing. No artifacts, no sign of people. Just a layer of clean, uniform clay 8 feet thick, laid down by water and completely sterile. Woolley figured they'd hit the bottom, the untouched ground under the city. He almost called it quits, but something, maybe gut instinct, maybe stubbornness, made him tell the workers to keep digging. 2.5 meters deeper through that dead clay, the story started up again. More pottery, tools, ashes. They'd found another city, buried under flood mud, a world wiped out and hidden for thousands of years. And it wasn't just The same thing showed up at Shurapak, at Kish, at Eridu. All dated to around 2900 BCE, the exact era Sumerian flood stories talk about. Not some slow, seasonal floodwaters. This was a sudden, violent catastrophe that swept everything away, leaving only mud behind. Geology backed up what the tablets had said for 4 millennia. The flood didn't just belong to myth, it left its mark in the ground. But the tablets actually tell a stranger story. The Sumerian flood myths don't blame the disaster on human wickedness like the later Bible does. They call it the moment the gods stepped back. The flood didn't mean divine punishment. It meant divine withdrawal. Look at the Atrahasis epic, written around 1800 BCE but based on even older tales. The gods aren't furious about human sin. They're tired of the noise. Literally, people are too loud, disrupting the order of things. So Enlil suggests the flood not as vengeance but as damage control. Cut the population, restore balance, reboot the system. It's not about morality or redemption. It's just the bureaucracy of crisis management. And here's something people often miss. After the flood, the Anunnaki never returned to rule directly. The survivor, Ziusudra in Sumerian, Atrahasis in Akkadian, Utnapishtim later on, gets immortality, but he's sent off to the mouth of the rivers, a lonely edge where gods and mortals don't cross paths anymore. He becomes a relic, a reminder of a world that's gone. When the waters pull back, the texts don't promise a return to the old days. Instead, they draw new lines. Lifespans get shorter. The gods keep their distance. The world runs on remote control. The Eridu Genesis calls this a covenant, but it feels less like a blessing and more like a formal separation. The Sumerian king list lays it out in numbers. Before the flood, 8 kings, reigns that stretch for thousands of years, gods calling the shots. After the flood, kingship comes down from heaven again, but now it's just for humans and their reigns shrink with every generation. The first post-flood king, Ger of Kish, rules for 1,200 years, still impressive but nothing like before. His successors get 960, then 840, then 720 years. By the first dynasty of Uruk, reigns drop into the double digits. By the time you hit historical kings, it's 18 years, 36 years, just normal lifespans. It doesn't feel like mythic exaggeration. It feels like a slow return to reality, as if whatever force once made people almost immortal just kept fading as the gods pulled back. The scribes weren't just telling tall tales. They were trying to remember a world that changed. Before the flood, the rules were different. After, everything shifted. The flood didn't end the world. It ended a kind of rule. The Anunnaki, whether you see them as real beings or just symbols of lost power, never came back to run things directly. They stepped back, turned into judges and watchers, not rulers or creators. And from then on, humanity was on its own. The Sumerians didn't think humans invented civilization by stumbling around and figuring things out. For them, civilization came from somewhere else, from a set of fixed principles called the ME. These weren't human ideas. They existed on their own out there, and people had to get them from the gods. Enki, chief among the Anunnaki, was the one who held these principles before anyone else. But if you look at the story of Inanna stealing the ME, it's not about creation at all. It's a heist. The ME are already there, neatly packaged and complete. Inanna doesn't create or discover them, she just takes them, moving them from Enki's city, Eridu, to her own in Uruk. Knowledge in these stories doesn't grow or evolve. It's passed along, stolen or given, but never made from scratch. It's always older than the people who hold it. You see this pattern all over Sumerian stories. People don't uncover knowledge. The gods hand it over, or sometimes humans snatch it away. The Anunnaki always come first. They're the original owners, the ones who decide who gets what. Take the instructions of Shurapak, this ancient piece of wisdom where a father gives advice to his son. Mixed in with tips about being honest and working hard, there's a line that really jumps out. The Anunnaki have determined your fate. Do not alter the water channel. Fate and water management show up side by side, as if running a city and controlling destiny are just two parts of the same job. Here, fate isn't about some mysterious destiny. It's about who gets water, who runs the land, who keeps the system going. The Anunnaki don't just rule the cosmos from afar. They run things on the ground. They divvy up resources, settle arguments, lay out the laws. Then, at some point, right after the flood, they're gone. And that's the big mystery running through Sumerian texts. Why did the gods, who set everything in order, suddenly pull out? Why leave humanity to manage things alone? The tablets never come right out with an answer, but they leave hints. The relationship between humans and gods just stops working. In the Atrahasis epic, the tipping point isn't sin or evil, it's noise. People multiply, cities grow, and the racket keeps the gods up at night. Enlil gets fed up. His anger isn't about morality, it's just annoyance at the commotion. He tries to fix things with plagues and famines, but nothing sticks. Finally, he decides, flood everything. But Enki, the one who always pushes back, slips a warning to Atrahasis. He tells him to build a boat and take not just animals, but people with useful skills, craftsmen, musicians, scribes, the keepers of the ME. When the flood hits, the gods watch in horror, not triumph. The great gods looked on in despair. There's a moment where Ninhursag, the mother goddess, breaks down in tears as she sees the destruction of the cities she helped create. This isn't like the biblical flood, where the world gets wiped clean for a fresh start. It feels more like giving up, a project gone out of control. The gods don't leave because they're beaten. They just can't keep up with what they started. After the flood, there's a shift. The gods accept Atrahasis' offering, but things aren't the same. They set new rules. Humanity keeps going, but the old closeness is over. The gods put up a barrier. Humans and gods won't mix like they used to. So the flood isn't really about punishment. It's about stepping back. The Anunnaki move from hands-on managers to distant overseers. They judge, but they don't teach. The Sumerian king list, that long list of rulers, actually shows this change. After the flood, kingship comes down from heaven again, but now it's in human hands. The rulers are mortals, working under the old laws, but the gods have faded into the background. With the gods gone, people do what they can. They copy the old tablets, rebuild the temples, keep the rituals going. They follow the patterns the gods left behind, always a little afraid that if they slip up, the last bits of wisdom will vanish too. This is what sets Sumerian civilization apart. They weren't obsessed with breaking new ground or outdoing the past. Their focus was on holding on, not outpacing. Every brick went exactly where earlier bricks had gone. Temples rose again and again on the same sacred spots. Ziggurats climbed skyward, tier by tier, echoing the structure of the cosmos. Everything they built, everything they did, spun around the belief that the most important things had already been laid down. People weren't meant to invent, they were supposed to remember. But if the Anunnaki really left, if they really stopped ruling directly, then the temples should have gone quiet. The ceremonies should have faded out. That didn't happen. For 3,000 years after the flood, Sumerian priests kept at it. Performing rituals meant to lure the gods back, to invite them down like they had in the old days. Ziggurats weren't there to show off human greatness. They were landing pads, structures meant to make return possible. The word ziggurat comes from the Akkadian zigguratu, which just means to build high. The Sumerian name goes deeper, Itemenenkai, house of the foundation of heaven and earth. Not a tower stretching up, but a foundation locking the divine to our world, a connection point, the threshold between realms. Take the ziggurat at partially rebuilt back in the 1980s. It rises in 3 huge tiers out of the desert, towering over the flat land for miles, a man-made mountain where nature didn't bother making any. When it was whole, it nearly hit 90 feet, its corners lined up with the cardinal points, neat as a ruler, its walls painted in the colors of the 7 classical planets. Black for Saturn, white for Jupiter, red for Mars, gold for the sun, and so on. On top, there was a little temple open to the sky with a bed, a table, food, and drink. Not for the priests, for the gods, just in case. In case they came back. In case one day they landed and found everything ready just like before. Herodotus, the Greek historian who showed up in Babylon in the 5th century BCE, took note of the Etemenenki ziggurat. He wrote about a temple at the top with a great couch and a golden table where, according to the priests, the god Marduk would descend and rest. By his time, the ritual was already ancient, a leftover from a past no one could really remember. Still, even then, long after anyone spoke Sumerian, the priests kept up the chamber at the summit, kept leaving out offerings, kept waiting for a return that never came. That's what the gods' departure looked like. Not some sudden disaster, not everyone packing up overnight. It was a slow fade. The Anunnaki just started appearing less, speaking less, until one day a generation woke up and realized the gods' grandpa didn't talk to anyone anymore. After that, all that was left was ritual, going through the motions. Not really sure why, but not daring to stop, because if they changed anything, they'd cut the last tie to an age when heaven and earth still touched. Over at Yale, in a collection of thousands of old clay tablets, there's a fragment labeled NBC 11108. It's a hymn to Enlil from around 2100 BCE, copied by a student whose little practice tablet somehow survived 4,000 years. The hymn calls Enlil's temple at Nippur, the bond of heaven and earth, the mooring post that holds fast the land. It's a sailor's metaphor. The temple is an anchor, the thing that keeps what would drift away tied down. But what's really being anchored? The text doesn't spell it out, but the meaning is there. Without the temple, without the ceremonies, without the hymns or the offerings, the link between gods and humans would slip. Heaven would drift off. The gods would leave for good. That was the Sumerians' nightmare. Not that the Anunnaki would punish them, but that the gods would forget about them. That the separation after the flood would one day become total. The gods so far gone that nothing, no ritual, no offering, no ziggurat could ever bring them back. So they kept building, copying, holding on. Every generation kept what the last one started, repeating patterns nobody really understood anymore, keeping up a conversation that had become one-sided, talking into silence, hopping that out there, somewhere, the Anunnaki were still listening. But the tablets hint at something else, too, a quieter idea that runs through the old prayers and star maps if you listen closely. Maybe the Anunnaki never left at all. Maybe they're still here, not as beings you could meet on the street, but as the principles that hold everything together. They're the ME, the rules that keep cities running and make sure knowledge passes from one generation to the next. Their leaving wasn't about bodies walking away. It was a shift, from being seen to being felt, from gods you could talk to the laws you live by every day. That changes the whole story. The Anunnaki didn't just pack up and abandon humanity. They became our legacy. The gifts they left, math, astronomy, law, farming, those aren't just old stories. They're the ways the Anunnaki still show up in the world. Whenever we count by 60s, we're echoing them. Whenever we draw up blueprints or set up a legal system, we're following the patterns they set down. Every law we obey, every calculation we make, that's their presence living on. So maybe the flood didn't wipe out their rule. It just changed how they ruled. The Anunnaki went from being kings to being codes, from rulers you could see to systems you just follow. And the Sumerians, with their obsession for copying old tablets and rebuilding temples exactly as before, they weren't just being nostalgic. They understood something real. The gods had become the patterns themselves. Keep the patterns alive, and you keep the gods alive too. Would the old scribes have agreed with this? Who can say? But it does solve the riddle at the heart of every Sumerian story, how people can mourn their gods' absence and still trust completely in their power. Both are true. The Anunnaki left as beings. They stayed as order. And so, standing in the empty places where gods once walked, people did what memory demanded. They built monuments to absence. They performed rituals for an audience that no longer answered. They pressed wedge-shaped marks into wet clay, hoping that one day, someone far in the future would read those marks and understand what had been lost and what had somehow survived. Just before dawn, the wind sweeps over the old mounds in southern Iraq, carrying dust that was once the walls of temples and palaces. Under the ground, tablets wait untouched, their stories unread. In distant museums, people in white gloves turn over fragments by the light, trying to translate not the birth of civilization, but its orphaning. The moment when the teachers walked away and the students were left with instructions, but not the understanding. That's what the Sumerians wrote down. Not a story of arrival, but of departure. Not glory, but absence. Not the start of divine rule, but its ending, carved into clay so that when memories fade, languages vanish, and empires crumble, someone somewhere might read those words and realize we weren't always alone. Once, the gods were here. Then they left. Everything we built after that was an attempt to remember what their presence felt like, to hold on to what they left us, to keep the hope alive that maybe, someday, they'd come back. But they didn't. And the silence that followed is still there, echoing through every ancient text, every ruined temple, every carefully copied tablet. The Sumerians weren't just making up gods to explain the world. They were witnesses, recording the end of an age, saving the memory of a time when the gods' rule was direct and real, and then suddenly gone. All that's left are the systems to follow, the rituals to perform, and the sobering truth that now, it's up to us to keep the world going, even though we didn't create it. That's the story pressed into the clay. Not legend, not fantasy, testimony. The testimony of those who watched the gods leave. And even as the Anunnaki faded from sight, they left behind something more lasting than their presence. A language. Not just Sumerian, although that has its own secrets, but the language of ritual. The grammar of sacred action that outlives even the gods themselves. Down in the British Museum's basement, tucked away in a climate-controlled maze of archives, there's a set of tablets, K3454 to K3476. On the surface, they're just clay slabs, but they hold the playbook for the Akitu festival, the Babylonian New Year. These tablets are from Ashurbanipal's time, 7th century BCE, but what they really capture is something older, Sumerian at the core. Every step is spelled out. Which door to open, which song to sing, what the king should do, where he should walk. Nothing is left to chance. What jumps out isn't how old these instructions are, it's how exact. We're not talking loose guidelines. This is a script. The priest even gets told what to say while washing his hands. No room for improvisation. No space for new ideas. You do it the way it's always been done. As in former times, that phrase is everywhere, tying every move back to some ancient starting point, long before these tablets were even written. But then there's this uncomfortable thing no one can quite ignore. If the Anunnaki, the gods, really left, if nobody's heard from them in ages, why keep going? Why spend days on ceremonies for gods who never show up, never answer back, never give a single sign they care? Because these rituals weren't about adoration, not the way later faiths understood worship. They were about keeping the machine running, system upkeep. The rituals locked in patterns from the old days, preserving every gesture, every word, every sequence that once made divine contact possible. Even when the gods stopped showing up, people kept the ritual going, just in case. If the Anunnaki ever returned, they'd find everything right where they left it. You can see this mindset carved into the bricks at Ur. Archaeologists dug up the ziggurat there and found that people had rebuilt and repaired the thing for over 1,000 years. Floods, wars, weather, didn't matter. Each generation stacked new bricks on the same foundation, following the same blueprint. The measurements stayed the same. The layout never drifted. The sacred math untouched. This wasn't just looking back for old time's sake. This was engineering. The Sumerians thought the ziggurat's shape, the 7 layers, the way it faced, the numbers behind its proportion, worked like a device. A kind of tuning fork for the gods. Change the design, break the connection. So they didn't change a thing. Through dynasties rising and falling, Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, all of them kept the ziggurat exactly as it was from the days when the gods still walked the earth. But let's be real, maintenance wears people out. It's not cheap. As generations rolled past and memories of the gods faded, the question had to come up, why do we keep doing this? There's an answer, tucked away in a prayer found at Sippar, now in a Berlin museum. This tablet is from about 1800 BCE, and it's addressed to Shamash, the sun god. The prayer doesn't beg for money or crops, it asks for memory. Shamash, great Lord, don't let me forget the words of the ancestors. Don't let the old tablets vanish. Don't let these rituals change even a little. If we forget, if we change a single word, we break the link. We're orphans. We lose our origin, our purpose. The gods gave us the me, the gifts of civilization. They taught us everything. Even if they're gone, even if they never show themselves again, the rituals carry the memory. They keep the knowledge alive. They keep hope alive that maybe, someday, the gods will come back. This isn't just religion. It's grief in disguise. A whole civilization processing loss through repetition. The Sumerians and everyone who came after weren't just worshipping the Anunnaki. They were mourning them. Every ritual was a way of remembering. Every ziggurat a monument. Not a gravestone for dead gods, but for a relationship that ended a long time ago. Still, the tablets won't let you believe the relationship just ended. The Anunnaki didn't disappear. They just changed roles, no longer right in the thick of things, but watching from the sidelines. They became judges, not builders. They're out there somewhere beyond what we can see. They don't step in directly. Instead, they leave hints, dreams, strange omens, signs you have to read like a code. No more conversations, just clues. You see this shift everywhere in the omen tablets. Museums all over the world have these collections, Louvre, Penn, you name it. Page after page, they show priests trying to read the gods' will. The Anunnaki don't talk to people anymore, but everyone still thinks they're pulling the strings. So people read the sky, watch animals, look at the way smoke curls up from a fire, and try to figure out what the gods want. It's all about patterns now. There's this one old Babylonian tablet, YOS 1031, that spells out how to read lunar eclipses. It's incredibly detailed. Every possible way the eclipse could look, lined up with what it means for humans. Tucked in there is one line that says a lot. When the moon god enters darkness, it is because the great gods have turned their faces away. Turned away, not gone, not dead, just looking somewhere else. The gods are still around, just not paying attention to us. They're busy with things we can't even imagine. Priests and diviners have to look for signs, anything that hints the gods might look back our way. This whole system, this theology of absence, lasted for centuries. From the earliest Sumerian cities all the way until Babylon fell to the Persians in 539 BCE. Even after that, even when everything was changing, some priests kept the old rituals going. Sometimes they didn't even understand the words anymore. They just knew that if they stopped, the last connection to the old world would break. The very last cuneiform tablet we know of, written in 75 CE, still had Sumerian on it. By then, Nobody had spoken Sumerian for 2,000 years. Yet somewhere in a half-forgotten temple, someone kept copying those words, kept the rituals alive, kept doing what people had started back when the Anunnaki supposedly walked the earth. Why hold on? Because letting go was unthinkable. If the rituals stopped, it would mean the Anunnaki were truly gone, not coming back. That's a loss too big to accept. As long as the rituals kept going, there was hope. Copy the tablets and memory stayed alive. Keep the temples standing and maybe, just maybe, the gods might return. But they didn't. Eventually, even the rituals faded away. The tablets got buried, temples crumbled, and the Anunnaki, whatever they really were, slipped out of living memory. All that was left were marks pressed into clay, sleeping under the desert until someone, thousands of years later, figured out how to read them again. When scholars finally cracked the code in the 19th century, they expected to find old superstitions, fairy tales, the half-blind groping of people trying to make sense of the world. But what they actually found was something else. Grief. Real, complex grief, written out in careful detail. A civilization remembering what it lost, mourning something it couldn't bring back. Like orphans who remember their parents' faces, their voices, but live with the ache of abandonment. That's what the tablets really show. The Anunnaki didn't just vanish in a flash. They faded over generations. People kept up the rituals, clutching to systems they no longer fully understood, preserving knowledge they could use but not truly grasp. Holding on long after the architects had left, hoping for a return that never came. Maybe that's why the Sumerian texts still hit so hard, even after 4,000 years. We know what it's like to live in the shadow of things that are gone. We keep systems running that we didn't invent. Nobody really remembers where they came from. And we go through rituals all the time. Elections, science, laws. Not because we understand every reason behind them, but because we're afraid of what might happen if we just stopped. The Sumerians weren't living in some primitive time. They were survivors, picking up the pieces after their world had already fallen apart. They held onto what they could, kept things going because they had to, and wrote it all down. Maybe they hoped that if they saved enough, copied enough, kept enough alive, whether in rituals or buildings or stories, maybe, just maybe, they could bring back what they'd lost. But it never came back. The Anunnaki didn't return. The age of face-to-face contact with the gods was over. Humanity was left alone with nothing but the me, the building blocks of civilization, handed down from above, not discovered but given. They stuck around, even when the ones who gave them disappeared. That's what the tablets really hold onto. Not a story about humanity falling, but about being left behind. Not some punishment, but the end of a lesson. The teachers deciding the students needed to figure things out on their own, walking away and leaving humanity to make sense of what they'd been taught. Everything after that, the rise and fall of empires, the creation of writing, laws, science, philosophy, it all comes from that moment. It's us trying to solve problems ourselves, to keep going with what the Anunnaki started, and maybe someday to outgrow even that. But outgrow it for what? To get back to the gods, to find that lost connection again, to rebuild the bridge between heaven and earth and have that flow of knowledge come back. The tablets don't answer, they just stop. The Anunnaki leave and we're alone. The rituals keep going. The ziggurats are empty. Time rolls on and what once was memory turns into myth, then into metaphor, and finally into ancient marks on clay that almost no one can read. Until someone digs them up. Until someone cracks the code. Until we, standing all the way on this side of history, look back and find ourselves face to face with the same ache, the memory of when the gods left. And the question that haunted the Sumerians is still here. Are they gone for good? Or are they just watching, waiting to see if we can hold on to what they gave us, keep the lessons alive, and maybe one day reach a point where we could really understand, not by repeating rituals but by actually getting it? By becoming the kind of students who don't need the teacher standing over their shoulder anymore. The tablets don't give us an answer. They just ask the question. That's what survived, not the solution, just the need to keep asking. And maybe that's enough. Maybe the real inheritance isn't the civilization or the laws or the buildings. Maybe it's the uncertainty. The reminder that we didn't make everything ourselves, that we're carrying something ancient, something bigger than us, and that even if we don't fully get it anymore, we have to protect it. Because if we lose it, we lose the last thread connecting us to a time when we weren't alone. Tonight, the wind blows over Eridu, over the old city, the first ziggurat, the place where the first tablets were pressed. The ruins are empty. The temples are gone. The ziggurats are just worn-down mounds of brick, but under the sand, the tablets are still there. And on those tablets, in marks made by hands that turned to dust thousands of years ago, the message still waits. They were here. They taught us. Then they left. And we've been alone ever since. This isn't just some old myth. It's memory. It's the record left behind by people who watched them go, who wrote it down with all the detail of a tax form, who managed to keep that story alive through wars, disasters, ages of forgetting, so that, somehow, we might understand what we lost, and what, against all odds, we managed to save. Are we even listening? Or have we already turned away, waving off their testimony as naive legend, packing up their sorrow in museums and archives, treating their most careful memories as nothing more than quaint stories from a culture that didn't know any better? Because if that's what we've done, if we've brushed off the Sumerians' account of the Anunnaki leaving as pure fantasy, then we've lost more than just some dusty old history. We've lost the memory of our own orphaning. We've forgotten that civilization wasn't something we built from scratch, but something given to us. We're standing on foundations we didn't lay, living inside systems we never designed. Somewhere back there, before the flood, before the quiet, before the long loneliness really began, we weren't alone. The Anunnaki were here. The tablets say so. The rituals keep it alive. You see it in the buildings, the stars, the math, the laws. Everything the Sumerians built, everything they fought to preserve for 3,000 years keeps insisting on one thing. We were taught, and then our teachers left. And ever since, we've been trying to remember what they showed us. We copy down their words even when we don't get them, perform their rituals long after they've gone silent, build their kind of buildings hoping they'll come back to fill them. Always hoping that if we just keep enough alive, remember enough, keep the flame burning maybe, just maybe, they'll return one day. But they haven't. And the silence just gets heavier. Those clay tablets, pressed by hands that knew what it felt like to be left behind, whisper across 4,000 years. Why did they leave? Will they ever come back? The clay doesn't answer, it only asks. That asking, carved in cuneiform, kept alive in ritual, hidden in sacred architecture, that's all that's really survived the departure. Not presence, not communion, not the time when heaven touched earth. Just the memory of what we lost. Just the question of what's left. Just the hope, fainter every generation but never totally gone, that somewhere out there, beyond all this silence and distance, the teachers are still watching, still waiting, still willing to return if we can finally prove we're ready for them. That's what's written on those Sumerian tablets. Not the gods arriving, but the gods leaving. Not the start of divine rule, but the end of it. Not our creation, but our orphaning. Right now, in museum vaults around the world, in cold, controlled rooms where nothing ever changes, those tablets wait. They're fragments of history's longest goodbye. They're witnesses to the moment everything shifted, when the gods fell silent, when the teachers walked away, when we looked up and realized we were alone under a quiet sky. And even now, if you stand in the ruins of Eridu before sunrise, you'll feel it. The wind still carries that silence, across deserts, across oceans, across thousands of years. It carries it all the way to us, standing here at the end of history, reading words pressed into clay by people who watched the departure and knew, absolutely, that nothing would ever be the same. They were right. Nothing was. Nothing ever will be. Because the Anunnaki left. And they never returned. And all that's left are these patient scraps of baked clay, the last echoes of a conversation that ended when the gods walked away and left us to manage a world we didn't make, following rules we could copy but never really grasp, tending systems whose builders had vanished beyond reach. This is what we inherited. This is what the flood left behind. Not destruction. Departure. Not a finish. Silence. And in that silence, humanity learned slowly and painfully to speak for itself, to build for itself, to rule itself. 4,000 years of stumbling, falling, fixing, and trying again, making mistakes the Anunnaki never would have made, wrestling with problems they would have solved in a breath, pushing forward without guidance, without a map, with no idea if we were even heading the right way. Still, we move forward. There's just no way back. The age when humans met the gods face to face, that's long gone. The Anunnaki are gone too. What's left now is memory, ritual, and that strange, almost frightening freedom, being left on our own to figure out what happens next. That's what the tablets say. That's what the Sumerians tried to hold onto. People talk about the Anunnaki like it's all about their arrival, but honestly, the real story is about their leaving and the silence that came after. Maybe we've been missing the point this whole time. Maybe we shouldn't be asking, why did they leave? Maybe the better question is, what did they turn into? Because something odd happens the more you read these tablets. You notice that the Anunnaki never really vanish from the record. Their names show up again and again for centuries, long after the flood, long after any direct contact. But they're different now. They're not main characters anymore. They're witnesses. They're the backdrop, setting the stage for everything people do. Take the museum in Philadelphia. They've got rooms full of tablets from Nippur, over 30,000 of them. Among them is a group the scholars call God lists. These are just lists of divine names, set out in order with a quick note about each one's job. They don't tell stories. They don't change much either. From 2400 BCE to 1600 BCE, it's the same names, same order, same assignments. Anu rules the heavens. Enlil takes care of the air and the earth. Enki's got the waters and wisdom. Inanna is Venus and war. Udu is the sun, the judge. The whole structure just stays frozen in place, almost untouched from the days when the Anunnaki supposedly walked among people. That's not normal for a pantheon. In Greek myths, gods come and go, fight, marry, fade away. In Hinduism, gods show up in new forms whenever the world needs them. The Sumerian gods, though, they don't move. The Anunnaki set things up before the flood, and that's how it stays, even when nobody remembers talking to these beings in real life. Why? Because the Anunnaki weren't like other gods. They didn't need belief to exist. They were the structure itself, the rules holding everything together. Their leaving wasn't about walking away. It was a shift. They went from being present and embodied to being the principles that shaped the world. They stopped being people and became the ground beneath our feet. You can see this in how Sumerian scribes learned their craft. In the tablet house, the Adaba, boys drilled the same signs over and over, building muscle memory. Then came word lists, proverbs, longer works. The curriculum didn't change, not for centuries, not from city to city. Someone kept it all locked down, standardized. But here's the twist. Right at the start, kids learned to copy hymns to the Anunnaki, and not dumbed-down versions either. The real temple hymns, with ancient language the kids didn't really get. They were memorizing words whose meaning was already slipping away, keeping something alive by sheer repetition. There's this practice tablet from Nippur, tucked away in Istanbul now. A student tries to copy the beginning of a hymn to Enlil, messes up, scratches it out, tries again. At the bottom, the teacher writes a note. Copy exactly. Do not alter. The words of the ancestors must be preserved as they were given. As they were given, not just written, not composed, given, even in the 18th century BCE. Scribes believed these texts came from somewhere else, somewhere higher. Their job wasn't to understand, not really. Their job was to keep the words alive, to pass them on, hoping that maybe one day someone would remember what they meant. This urge to preserve ran deep in Sumerian culture. At back in the 1920s, teams from the British Museum and the University of Pennsylvania started digging and found something wild in the Royal Cemetery. Sure, they uncovered all the gold headdresses, lapis lazuli jewelry, and musical instruments with crazy detailed inlays. Those are impressive. But what really made the archaeologists pause wasn't just the beauty of these things. It was that a lot of them weren't new ideas. They were copies, careful reproductions of even older designs. Take Queen Puabi's burial, PG 800. Her headdress, all gold leaves, carnelian beads, and lapis bands, was arranged in this intricate pattern. When the archaeologists studied it, they realized the design followed the same geometric ratios as temple architecture from the Uruk period, which was 300 years before her time. So this wasn't just some flashy new creation. It was a deliberate throwback, a design kept alive because it meant something far beyond looks. You see the same thing with cylinder seals. Those little carved stones Mesopotamians used to stamp their mark on clay. They go way back. The oldest ones from the Uruk period, around 3400 BCE, show off scenes of rituals, monsters, and buildings, all carved with impressive skill. Later seals, from 2500 BCE and after, just copy these earlier images, even when nobody remembers what the originals meant. There's even a seal from the III period, now at Yale, with a scene scholars can't make sense of: strange figures, a building that doesn't match any known temple. Still, someone ordered that seal. Someone carved it. Someone used it for real business, even though the story it told was already ancient and mysterious. So why bother copying something you don't even understand? For the Sumerians, the power was in the form itself. The right proportions, the right symbols. They believed these things tapped into forces, the me, that worked whether people understood them or not. Preserve the form and you preserve the function, even if you forget the reason behind it. This was life after the Anunnaki left. A civilization obsessed with holding on, copying, repeating the patterns set by beings who weren't there to explain any of it. Every generation passed down what they inherited, convinced that the real knowledge lived inside these forms, and as long as the forms survived, so would the knowledge. But nothing lasts forever. Forms fade, tablets crack, languages die out. Centuries rolled by, Sumerian turned into Akkadian, then Akkadian became Aramaic. Old cities emptied, new empires took over, and the ancient chain started to snap. In Ashurbanipal's library at Nineveh, archaeologists found proof of a last-ditch effort to save what was left. Ashurbanipal, king of Assyria from 668 to 627 BCE, sent scholars all over his empire with one job: find every old tablet you can and bring back copies. They ended up with more than 30,000 tablets, including Sumerian texts already 1,500 years old even then. One tablet, now known as K3657 at the British Museum, has a note from the scribe, written according to an original from Uruk, a city whose tablets are very old. The writing was difficult. Some signs I could not read. I have copied what I could and left the rest blank so that future scribes might fill in what I have missed. It's hard not to feel for him. Here's a scribe working in the biggest library of the ancient world, staring at a text so old even he can't read parts of it. He does his best. He admits defeat in places. He leaves blanks, hoping someone down the line will do better. Then he seals up the tablet and puts it on the shelf where it sits for 2,600 years. When archaeologists finally find it, those blanks are still there. No one ever filled them in. That knowledge, the stuff the scribe couldn't recover, it's gone. The gaps became permanent. By the first millennium BCE, this was happening everywhere. Sumerian as a spoken language died out around 2000 BCE, surviving only as a sacred language in temples. By 600 BCE, even that was fading. Priests still performed Sumerian rituals, but they didn't understand the words anymore. They just repeated the syllables, keeping the forms alive, even as the meaning slipped away. Still, they kept going. The rituals went on. They kept copying the tablets. The temples stayed open, all of it right up to the collapse, when the Persians rolled into Babylon in 539 BCE, bringing new gods, new ceremonies, a different sense of how the universe works. Even after the old political world that held Sumerian tradition together for 3,000 years fell apart, a few scattered priests in lonely temples clung to their routines. The very last cuneiform tablet we know of turned up in a tiny Babylonian temple. It's dated 75 CE. Think about that. 75 years after Jesus was born, when Rome controlled everything, when Jerusalem was rubble, when the ancient world barely resembled itself. And on that last tablet, wedged between mundane notes about temple offerings, you find Sumerian. Not just words, blessings, set phrases, the same ritual language that had been copied over and over for 3 millennia. Odds are, the scribe who wrote it didn't even understand what he was writing. He was just keeping the chain unbroken, repeating the sounds, hanging onto the thin ghost of a language spoken back when the pyramids were new, and according to the old stories, the Anunnaki had only just left. Then one day it all stopped. No more copying. Temples locked up. Scribes died and nobody took their place. Cuneiform, the Sumerians' way of bottling memory, the thing that kept the story of the Anunnaki's departure alive for 3,000 years, just went quiet. Some tablets survived, but only by luck. The ones baked hard in ancient fires, the ones buried deep in temple foundations, the ones left in dry places where rot couldn't reach them. They sat there, untouched, for nearly 2,000 years. Then, in the 1800s, European archaeologists started digging up the old mounds in Mesopotamia and found, to their astonishment, whole libraries waiting under the sand. When scholars first cracked the code of Sumerian writing in the 1850s, when they read the Epic of Gilgamesh, the King List, the hymns to the Anunnaki, they jumped to a conclusion. These were just myths. Primitive people trying to make sense of the world with stories about gods. Hardly anyone stopped to imagine the Sumerians might be recording real events, preserving the memory of a time when rulers looked different, when knowledge was handed down directly, when the beings they called gods walked openly among them. And then, for reasons the tablets barely hint at, left. But what if that first assumption was wrong? What if the Sumerians weren't inventing stories but actually passing down testimony? What if their relentless copying, their refusal to change a single word, their stubborn rituals they barely understood anymore, weren't superstition, but a desperate effort to hold on to history? Maybe they knew they were living in the aftermath of something enormous, something they couldn't fully grasp but refused to let slip away. If you look at the tablets this way, everything shifts. Don't read them as fantasy, see them as records. Not poetry, but paperwork. Not the wild dreams of ancient people, but the testimony of survivors at the edge of a vanished age. Read them with that lens and a pattern pops out over thousands of tablets across 3,000 years. The Anunnaki were here. They built civilization. They taught us law, farming, numbers, astronomy. They ran things directly. Then suddenly, after a flood which, by the way, left traces in the geology, they pulled back. They didn't disappear or die, they just stepped away. Instead of walking among humans, they watched from a distance. Left alone, people did what they could. Saved every scrap of knowledge, kept every ritual alive, copied every tablet, rebuilt every temple, tracked every star, guarded every bit of math they had, hoping it would be enough. Maybe someone someday would figure out what had been lost. Maybe, against all odds, we'd find a way to get it back. That's what the departure really looks like, seen through 4,000 years of written evidence. Not some dramatic exit, but a slow, steady fatting. The presence dwindles, the contact slips away, until all that's left is the structure, the ME, the divine order that runs civilization. just ticking along, automatic, with nobody around to explain how or why it all began. So maybe this is the answer to the whole puzzle of why the Anunnaki left. They didn't really abandon us. Instead, they shifted from being teachers we could see and talk to becoming the ideas and systems we live by every day. They stopped walking beside us and became the very ground we walk on. Every law we write still follows the patterns they set down. Every time we use math, we're using their designs. When we plan a city, measure a field, or watch the stars, we're tapping into the ME, the gifts they left behind. If you look at it this way, their leaving wasn't some tragedy. It was more like graduation. They didn't go because they messed up or because we disappointed them. They left because their job was done. The foundations were solid. Humanity had learned enough to keep civilization running, even if we didn't get everything right, even if we only understood bits and pieces of what they taught us. For the Sumerians, the gods' departure felt like a loss and they grieved it. But maybe from the Anunnaki side, if they even had a side, if they even thought that way, it was a success story. They had planted the seeds of civilization, packed knowledge into forms we could pass on, built systems that could last without them constantly watching. Then they stepped back, not out of neglect, but out of trust that what they'd built would last. Would the old scribes buy this idea? Who knows? But it does let you hold two things at once. The Anunnaki are gone and they're still here. We lost direct contact, but their influence didn't go anywhere. The age of gods running the show ended, but their rules still shape what we do. Tonight, the wind moves over the ruins, carrying sand that used to be bricks, that once made temples, foundations for ziggurats built to call the gods back. Under that sand, scattered across continents, ancient tablets wait. They hold fragments pressed by hands that turned to dust long ago, preserving stories that might be the wildest mythology ever dreamed up, or spot-on records of where we really came from. It's up to us how we read them. We can shrug them off as old superstition, label them as myths, treat them like relics from folks who just didn't know better. Or we can listen. We can treat them as real testimony. Maybe the Sumerians knew something we've forgotten. That civilization wasn't just stumbled upon, but planted on purpose. That knowledge wasn't built up slowly, but handed over in a rush. That once before the flood, humans had company, teachers who walked among us. And those teachers didn't leave because they had to, but because they were ready to, leaving behind systems meant to work without them. And if we go down that road, if we take the tablets as record, not fiction, well, then we have to face something uncomfortable. Are we actually keeping what they gave us alive? Or, convinced we made it all up ourselves, are we starting to tear down the very systems the Anunnaki built, thinking we can do better, even though we never really understood their designs? The Sumerians never set out to improve on the past. They just tried to save it. Maybe that was the smart move. Maybe they understood something we lost, that some knowledge isn't discovered, it's inherited, and our job isn't to reinvent everything, but to protect what's been handed down, to keep the chain unbroken. That's what the tablets say if we're willing to listen. That's what the departure means if we take them seriously. The Anunnaki were here. They taught us. They built the systems. Then they stepped away. We've been trying to keep those systems going, sometimes well, sometimes not, for 5,000 years. And maybe that's enough. Maybe their departure wasn't abandonment, but trust. Trust that we could keep going. Trust that their systems would hold. Trust that, even without them looking over our shoulders, even with only scraps of memory left, civilization would make it. And it has. Not perfectly, not completely. Sometimes only just, but it's still here. The chain hasn't broken, the tablets survived, the knowledge made it, the ME still work. And somewhere maybe, out of sight, out of reach, the Anunnaki are watching to see what we'll do with their gift. Will we protect it or throw it away? Will we honor it or waste it? Will we prove worthy of the trust they showed when they stepped back and left the world in our hands? The tablets don't tell us everything. They just record what happened. Once, a long time ago, the gods were here. They taught us everything we needed. Then came a flood that wiped the slate clean, and after that they disappeared, leaving behind only memories, rituals, and systems built to last without them. That's the story. That's what it means when we talk about their departure. 4,000 years of copying, rebuilding, guarding, and passing down for what? To protect the knowledge that we weren't always alone. To keep the memory that once upon a time the Anunnaki walked among us. Civilization wasn't just our own invention, they designed it. And when they left, they didn't leave us empty-handed. They handed us law, mathematics, astronomy, architecture, and everything else we'd need to keep things running. Have we done a good job? That's something every generation has to figure out for itself. The Sumerians sure thought they were doing their part. They copied every tablet, rebuilt every temple, kept every ritual alive, and passed down every formula. They held on as tightly as they could, hoping the Anunnaki's gifts wouldn't vanish in the silence that followed. Now it's on us, our turn. We can finally read the tablets again, finally hear what the Sumerians fought so hard to save, finally try to grasp what they wanted us to know, even from across 4,000 years. The Anunnaki left, but they gave us everything we'd need. Our job isn't to sit around mourning their absence. It's to keep their systems alive, to pass them down, to make sure the chain never snaps. So that, even 1,000 years from now, someone out there can still find the principles the Anunnaki set down when God still walked the earth. That's what we inherited. This is what made it through, the principles, not the presents. Not gods answering prayers, but systems that keep working if we care for them. And maybe that's the biggest lesson buried in the tablets. Civilization doesn't just happen. Someone built it. Someone maintained it. It takes effort. If we forget that, if we start thinking our world sprang up just from our own cleverness, we risk losing everything the Anunnaki built and the Sumerians spent centuries keeping alive. Their departure taught the Sumerians humility. They realized they didn't make themselves, didn't invent everything from scratch. They learned to respect what they'd been given, to guard and maintain the inheritance even when they couldn't improve it. Maybe we can learn the same thing, if we're open to it. If we're willing to see the old clay testimony as more than just myth. Maybe it's memory. Maybe it's a record of a real time when we weren't alone, when teachers walked among us, and when, after finishing the lesson, those teachers left us to carry on. Tonight the wind is blowing sand over the ruins. The tablets rest in museum cases. The testimony waits patient, steady, for someone new to come along and ask the question the Sumerians never could answer. If the Anunnaki left, will they ever come back? Or maybe their absence is the final test. Maybe the whole point is to see if we can take care of what we were given, if we can pass it on and keep it alive without anyone holding our hand, if we can keep the chain unbroken, if we can carry on what the Anunnaki started when they came down from the sky, built civilization, taught us, and then walked away into silence. The tablets can't answer that. They can only keep the question alive, and the fact that they survived, through floods, wars, and ages of forgetting, maybe that's the answer in itself. We made it through. We kept the gift alive. We passed the knowledge on. The chain held. Maybe that's all the Anunnaki ever wanted from us. Not perfect understanding, not flawless memory, just this, that we preserve, that we maintain, that we remember. Let's not forget, there was a world before the quiet settled in. Back then, someone taught us. We didn't come up with civilization on our own, it was handed down. The gods were here. That really happened. Then they left. We kept going. What's lasted isn't the gods themselves, but the mark of what we did next. People pressed their stories into clay, people who knew what it felt like to be left behind. That's what survived. Not the gods, just the memory of their gifts, and the duty to keep it all alive. Always. Deep in the archives of the Oriental Institute in Chicago, where this whole search began, the clay tablets sleep in their drawers. The room stays the same temperature always. Humidity never budges. Time barely seems to move in those narrow aisles where ancient fragments rest on foam, each one logged, photographed, translated, then slid back into darkness until someone asks for it again. Every so often late at night, when the place is empty and the security lights throw long shadows, a conservator will sit alone in the archive. White cotton gloves, magnifying glass, an LED lamp aimed just right so it won't heat the clay. In the quiet, with nothing but breath and the soft sigh of the air system, something strange happens. The tablets stop being just artifacts. They start to feel alive. Not alive with the old gods. The Anunnaki aren't showing up for a curtain call. It's not about that. It's the scribes. The people who pressed their stories into wet clay 4,000 years ago, leaving fingerprints that still linger. It's the feeling of intention, of care, of someone hoping desperately that what they wrote would matter, would reach someone someday in a future they couldn't even picture. And it did. It found us. 4 millennia later, through the fall of empires, the death of languages, floods, fires, and plain old time, the message survived. Not all of it. Some is gone, some broken, some parts no one can translate anymore. But enough made it. The Anunnaki left. That much is obvious. Whether they were gods, teachers, or just symbols for something lost, the old texts say they withdrew after the flood, leaving people on their own. No more direct contact. No more cosmic administrators. Humanity just had to keep things going, copying, preserving, hanging on to systems they hadn't built but didn't want to lose. Even that didn't last. The last scribes died. Temples closed, tablets got buried. Silence, total, heavy, fell over Mesopotamia for 2,000 years. Then archaeologists came back. Linguists cracked the code. The old words could be read again. And really, what those words show isn't about the Anunnaki at all. It's about what their leaving did to us. The urge to hold on, to remember, to pass something forward so what was given isn't lost forever. Every civilization since Sumer has faced this. How do we save what matters? How do we send it on to the future? How do we make sure the hard-won knowledge of the past survives, that it doesn't just vanish when we're gone? The Sumerians used clay. It lasts. Fireproof, durable, simple. They picked a medium that would outlive their empires, and it did. We've picked other things: paper, tape, hard drives. Each one gets flimsier, needs more constant care, risks bigger disasters. Maybe the Sumerians knew something we've let slip. Preserving what matters means keeping it simple. Put it in something that lasts. Don't trust the most important stuff to tech that breaks or formats that future people can't read. Clay tablets don't need electricity. They don't care about software updates. They don't depend on any invention younger than 3000 BCE. If you can learn the script and have some light, you can read them. In their way, they're perfect. And what they saved wasn't just info, it was intent. Not just facts, but feeling. People who have held these tablets talk about it all the time. You don't just read ancient words, you feel ancient presence. The weight of the clay, the roughness of the surface, the grooves where the stylus bit in. And sometimes, if the light hits right, you see the fingerprints. That's what makes it real. Not the words, they can be translated, argued over. But the fingerprints don't lie. That's direct connection. Proof that someone long ago cared enough to shape the clay, press the marks, and try to reach us. Proof that presence can cross even 4,000 years. So what did they really pass down? That they inherited a world already finished, not something they had to build from scratch. That civilization wasn't just the result of human struggle. It was something handed over, taught, passed along by these beings they called the Anunnaki. These Anunnaki set up the crucial stuff: law, math, astronomy, architecture. Humanity's job was to keep those things going. Then came the flood, the one that left its mark in the earth itself, and after that the Anunnaki left. They were gone, and people had to carry on alone. Is this just a story? Or is it a memory? Did the Sumerians make it up, or did they really remember something huge? Were they dreaming up gods to explain the world, or just trying to record what actually happened at the end of an age? We can't squeeze an answer out of the tablets. They don't explain themselves. They just insist the Anunnaki were here, they taught us, they left, we remember. Maybe that's enough. Maybe we don't need proof. Maybe what matters is that someone tried to tell us and we should at least listen. What if they're right? What if civilization wasn't invented but planted? What if we're just caretakers, not creators? Maybe our real job isn't to keep inventing but to protect what was already given to us. You don't have to literally believe gods dropped out of the sky. The real lesson is a little humility. We stand on foundations we didn't build. We use math someone else figured out. We live in societies shaped by rules we inherited, not invented. We're all just one more link in a chain that stretches way back, past memory, past anything we can see. The Sumerians got this. They didn't think they were the beginning. They just saw themselves as messengers, not inventors. For 3,000 years, they copied tablets they barely understood, kept up rituals that had lost their meaning, stuck with systems whose creators had vanished. Why? Because they believed, rightly, it turns out, that keeping things alive matters more than understanding every detail. Now the question lands on us. We can finally read those tablets. We can finally hear what they were saying. So what are we going to do with all of this? Will we protect it, pass it on? Will we keep the chain going? Or, convinced we're so much smarter than the past, will we let it all fall apart? The tablets won't answer. They wait in drawers, silent and solid, holding on to words that have lasted 4,000 years and could easily last 4,000 more if we want them to. If we care enough. If we believe that what our ancestors tried so hard to tell us still has meaning. In the dark archive, after the conservator slides the last tablet back, switches off the lights and locks the door, the clay just sits there. Cool, quiet. The marks don't catch any light now. The fingerprints are hidden in the dark. But they're still there, still waiting, still holding the story of people who watched their teachers leave and wrote it down so we'd know. We weren't always alone. Once the teachers were here. They gave us what we needed. Then they left. And we kept going, keeping up what was given, passing it forward, holding onto the memory so it wouldn't vanish completely. That's the real inheritance. What made it through the loss? Not the gods themselves, but the knowledge they left behind. Not their presence, but the systems they built. Not certainty, but testimony. Testimony pressed into clay, shaped by hands that knew what it meant to be left on your own. That's what made it to us, 4,000 years later. The Anunnaki left. The Sumerians remembered. The tablets lasted. The chain held. Now it's us. We're the next link, stretching from the dawn of writing into a future we can't predict. What we do with that inheritance, it's on us. We can preserve it or waste it. Honor it or ignore it. Keep the chain going or let it break. The tablets can't make the choice for us. They only show us what happened. That once civilization was a gift. That it survived disaster. That it was carried through thousands of years. That it outlasted its makers and kept going in human hands, imperfect but persistent, through centuries of copying and careful keeping. And now, after 2,000 years of silence, we can finally read the words again. We can finally hear what the Sumerians tried to say. We can finally understand what they worked so hard to preserve. Look at what they left behind. The words they pressed into clay, buried deep in the ground, copied and recopied until the story stretched across the ages. Clearly, it mattered to them, and now it's landed with us. The Anunnaki left. That part's clear. But what they built stuck around, and somehow we ended up holding the chain they started. Every link, every scribe, every generation held it for a while, 4,000 years and counting. When night settles in, museums go dark, and those ancient tablets lie hidden in storage. Their message waits. The clay sits, stubborn and patient, its cuneiform marks holding steady through everything time has thrown at them. That testimony is just sitting there, waiting for us to decide what we'll do with it. waiting for us to make sense of what we've inherited. And in that silence, after the gods left while the story keeps unfolding, the wind drifts over old ruins, sand shifts. The buried cities of Iraq sleep under the stars. Somewhere in all that darkness, in clay that's lasted longer than kings and empires, the message holds. They were here. They left. We remember. That memory carried through disaster after disaster, passed on even when everything else fell apart. That's what's lasted. Not certainty, not proof, just testimony. Words pressed into clay by hands that turned to dust, still speaking after 4,000 years of silence. It's enough. Enough to know we weren't always on our own. Enough to know civilization was handed down, not just dreamed up. Enough to know that when the teachers left, they didn't leave us empty-handed. And here we are still going. Messy, incomplete, falling down and getting up again, but still going. The chain hasn't broken. The testimony's still here. So now in those late hours before sunrise, when everything is quiet, museums asleep, tablets at rest, the cuneiform shadows stretched thin, we can close our eyes and imagine. The Anunnaki walking through the world's first cities, teaching the first scribes, setting down the first laws. And then when the flood came, stepping back, pulling away, leaving us to figure things out. Maybe they're still watching from wherever gods watch, watching as we copied their tablets, rebuilt their temples, tried to keep their systems going, clung to their memory. Year after year, century after century. Eventually, the memory itself became the inheritance. The testimony turned into our truth. Their departure turned into a lesson. We can keep what we didn't invent. We can pass on what we don't fully grasp. We can protect what matters for thousands of years. Maybe that's what the Anunnaki wanted all along. Not worship, not prayers to bring them back, just this. Remember, we keep it going. We don't stop. And we haven't. The tablets say so. The stories are still here. The chains unbroken. Then after they left, in that huge silence, in the emptiness that's been with us ever since the flood, we did what the Sumerians did. We saved what mattered. We passed it on. We remembered. And those memories, pressed into clay by hands that felt the world changing, somehow reached us. Through empires rising and falling, through centuries grinding everything down. The message survived. The Anunnaki left, but they gave us what we needed. And we carried it forward. One link at a time. One life to the next. Testimony hidden in clay. Memory riding the slow current of years. Knowledge held tight, even when disaster struck. And now, with night coming and the story almost over, we can rest. The chain is still whole. The story survived. The memory is still alive. And somewhere, in a museum basement or a dusty archive, there's a clay tablet that will outlast us all, still holding the fingerprints of a scribe who lived 4,000 years ago. Proof they walked the earth. Proof they cared enough to leave something behind. Proof that what they saved mattered, enough to stay alive for 40 centuries. And proof that we, the ones holding the chain right now, really did get what they wanted us to have. The knowledge that we weren't always alone. The memory of what they gave. Their story of leaving. And the job of carrying it forward. So the chain stays whole. So the memory keeps breathing. So even people will never know, far in the future, can say, once the Anunnaki were here. They taught us. They left. And we remembered. Always.